In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace your front strut. This is not to be confused with a strut assembly or strut and spring assembly. This is just a shock absorber part of the front strut. After finishing this repair, it's important to have an alignment done on your vehicle. Let's get started. Let's remove the wheel, 21mm socket, remove all 5 of your lug nuts, and then pull the wheel off. Take the wheel off. Let's remove the sway bar link mounting bolt that attaches it to the strut, 17mm in size. Now it might not come off directly, but I will give it a try. If not, then we'll just put some locking pliers on the backside and hold it. So it looks like the whole stud is spinning, just like I thought. I put locking pliers on the backside, holding the stud, as you can see. Now keep in mind, this may destroy the boot. Hopefully it doesn't, but it can. All right, looks like it worked. Let's release the locking pliers. Pull the sway bar link out, and I was careful enough and did not cause any damage to this boot, so we can reuse this. On the other side, we have this brake hose bracket that's attached with a 14mm bolt. Get this out of here. All we have left is to unbolt the strut from the knuckle. Use a 19mm socket on the nut side, and you can hold the bolt with a 19 wrench. Leave that one in there to hold things in place while you remove the lower one. Get these bolts out. Now be careful, once you remove this last one, the knuckle's gonna wanna drop down. You can't go too far because you still have the axle connected. You can unbolt the axle and push it through, but it's not necessary if you are careful. Get this out of here, drop this down, and you can push the strut back in order to separate it instead of pulling the knuckle forward. Just like that. Now I'm going to tie this with a bungee cord so that it stays here and doesn't want to fall forward. Now up under the hood, you'll see where the top of the strut mounts. Take off all 3 of these 12mm mounting nuts. I'm going to leave this one for last because it's the most accessible, and I'll show you in a second why. At this point, this is all that's holding the strut in, so I'm going to go underneath and hold it with one arm as I loosen this one. Hold the strut. And there it is. I have the strut set up in my spring compressor, and I'm going to compress the spring until it's shorter than this distance so that I can freely spin the strut mount and the strut itself and loosen them up without it exploding, basically. Notice how it broke free? That's exactly what we want. Now let's remove this rubber cap. This is a 19mm nut, so grab your socket and put it here. Preferably you'd want to use an impact gun. Loosen this up. I'm going to hold the bottom of the strut at the same time. That way it doesn't fall down. Okay, shouldn't be too tight. Remove this and set it aside. And then you can take the strut mount off. And from the bottom, you can pull the strut itself straight out. Off of the old strut, we need to remove the bump stop as well as the rubber seat on the bottom for the spring. Take the new strut and set this down. You'll see that there is a notch here. That's what this notch needs to line up with. That's just how the spring is made, basically. That's where it needs to sit. And then put the bump stop back. Now, if you still had the boot that goes over, you would want to put that one back too. In our case, the boot was completely torn apart, so there's no way to put it back together. Slide the strut back in. Put the strut mount on. Start on the mounting nut. And because there's no way for me to torque this, because if I spin this, the whole shaft is going to spin, I'm just going to make it nice and tight with my impact. Okay, put the cap back on at the top, and let's release pressure off of this. As you do this, make sure that the spring sits exactly where it needs to at the bottom as well as at the top. You'll see it has some notches where the end of the spring needs to go. I left one mounting nut up here so that as I put this new strut in, I can quickly reattach it. That way I don't have to hold it for a long time. So slide it in, and this is the tricky part because you have to hold it from down there, but at the same time you have to see what's happening here. So I'll just try to line up the bolt holes. Start one in. Once this one's pretty much bottomed out, you can let go. And we can put the other two in. I'm going to snug these up, but I will not torque them until the end because I want the vehicle to be on the ground with the wheels on. I want pressure up against this strut tower so that I know it's seated completely. But like I just said, I will snug them up, that way this is not wobbling around. Grab the knuckle and slide it into the strut. Bring it up, and let's put the two bolts in. Keep in mind they went in back to front. Once you get one in, it'll be a lot easier to line up the second one. Put the mounting nuts on, and there's no adjustment to these. Some vehicles have adjustment where you can push it in. This one has a little bit of wiggle to it, but that is not the adjustment. That's just the free play in the bolts, so you don't have to worry about anything. Let's tighten these up. I'm going to torque the nut side because it'll give me a lot more accurate of a torque, and the torque for these two is 113 foot-pounds. That's it right there. Of course, if your bolt was spinning while you're torquing it, you just hold it with the wrench. Let's get this bracket lined up here. Put the bolt in. I put some anti-seize on the threads because these like to rust out, and then they'll seize onto this bracket. Snug it up. Lastly, the sway bar link, slide it through, put the mounting nut on, put some anti-seize on this mounting nut so that it doesn't get stuck in the future. It'll make it easier to remove next time. Let's snug it up and then we'll torque it. Unfortunately, I had to resort to putting locking pliers on this again so I can torque it, otherwise it would just spin. The torque for this is 55 foot-pounds. No damage was caused to the boot. Perfect. If you have to do this, just be very careful. Now let's put the wheel on. Put back all 5 of your lug nuts, bottom them out, and then torque them to 76 foot-pounds. And double check them. Back at the top, the torque for these is 29 foot-pounds. All right, they're all torqued.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.